Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about RTI, what it is, and how to use it. RTI. RTI stands for Response to Intervention. Now, what are the benefits to early intervention? And the key is intervention. Early intervention ensures that all students receive high-quality instruction in the general education classroom. It also promotes immediate intervention as soon as students' reading problems are revealed. It also prevents substantial reading difficulties from developing. If it's something that can be catched early enough, then intervention stops that gap from widening as we lead into the upper grades. And the last part is reduces inappropriate referrals and placements in special education for students with disabilities, meaning it cuts down on the number of students who are referred for special education evaluations when it's really a matter of just needing that extra help in order to get them where they need to be for learning. Now, when it comes to intervention, there are two methods. The first method is problem solving, and the second method is called standard protocol. The first one we're going to be looking at is the problem solving method. Okay, so this is the problem solving method. The problem solving method is basically, it is a school-based team, and it's one that schools have used in the past, however, and some still continue to use, but it is something that they are moving on from. However, some schools still use this, but let's go on. A school-based team, and what they do is they consider student performance data. So they collect the data and they can analyze it. And then they identify and define any learning problem from that data. Okay? And once they've identified that problems, then they develop interventions specifically to solve that problem. And once those interventions have gone into effect, they use those interventions for certain periods of time. And then once they're complete, the school-based team goes back and evaluates the effects of those interventions. So hopefully those specific interventions will manage to take care of those specific learning problems that were defined. Now, one thing that the problem-solving method is that it uses a logical organizer to manage and evaluate data. So that's a positive aspect to it. And it also does prioritize targets. And another thing that's good about it is that it implements and evaluates individual interventions. However, one drawback is that procedures and decision-making criteria aren't specific. There's no method of what exactly is the criteria we need to look at when there is that discrepancy. So some people say this method can be considered vulnerable to application mistakes. So there can be issues with the way that the intervention is applied. So what is problem-based intervention? First, they use a universal screening, and that is a class-wide assessment that is assessing all of the classroom students at the same time. And it's going to determine the effectiveness of classroom instruction. And then what they do is they take those content scores and they identify the core content that they need to be looking at. And in literacy, we focus on phonemic awareness, phonics and word study, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. In the math area, we focus on number properties and operations, measurement, geometry, data analysis and probability, and algebra. Next, we place students into appropriate tiers for high-quality research-based instructions, which means students in Tier 1 are students that are already either working at or are above grade level. Students in Step 2, Tier 2 intervention are students who usually need that little bit of extra help to get them where they need to be at grade level. Tier 3 is reserved for students who need high intensive instruction. It usually is a very small group of students, a very low percentage of the class. Usually it is the lowest 4 or 5 scoring students in your class, and they use specific, and this is where we say metacognitive strategies. The instruction is very specific. It's explicit, systematic, and each student has their progress carefully monitored. And then after that targeted intervention, for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, this is what will happen. So students in Tier 2 who make good performance, they can move out of Tier 2 instruction and actually go to Tier 1. Students who don't make adequate performance can also stay in Tier 2 for another cycle, which usually lasts about 6 weeks. If students are still struggling, then they can see what exactly is happening in comparison to the students who are in Tier 3. Students who are unable to make sufficient progress can be moved to Tier 3, and the opposite is where Tier 3 students who make good progress can be moved into the Tier 2 category. Also, in Tier 3, when we have students who do not make progress or have not moved adequately in their cycles, that is what we can consider looking at whether or not the student may qualify for the evaluation process to qualify for special education services. Now, the second model we look at for RTI is the standard protocol model. Now, the standard protocol model means basically the standard is the same for all students. treatment is for instruction and intervention, and protocol is for the intervention or instruction. What is different about the standard protocol method is that material used is validated research-based material that has been proven. The material has been used consistently and with fidelity. The intervention provided is by qualified staff who have received training before instruction starts. In addition, those providing instruction receive ongoing support and professional development to ensure that the intervention is being delivered correctly. As with the previous RT I mentioned, this first step is the universal screening. Very similar. All students are provided with a class-wide assessment, and we are going to be looking at ensuring that we are, again, using an assessment that is a reflection of all students' backgrounds. And it's going to be administered to all students. And then we move to looking at the data, and of course moving on to what is the content we will be focusing on. The same for literacy, the same for mathematics. Then, of course, once the data has been researched and chosen, then again, we will be moving on to the targeted intervention strategies. Again, Tier 1 is whole class-wide interventions, where we still will be teaching class, and for everyone, of course, progress is monitored. Tier 2 is the targeted intervention, and those are students who, again, need that little extra bit of help in order to get into Tier 1. And also Tier 2 is for those students where, if, again, they don't make that progress in the first cycle of Tier 2, they can stay in Tier 2 again a second time. And then, again, if there is still having difficulty, they can move up into Tier 3. And of course, again, Tier 3 is students who are in that very lowest percentage of the classroom for scoring, depending on what the criteria is. And it is for students when they did not make sufficient progress in Tier 2 as well. They can be moved to Tier 3 to get that more intensive instruction. Students in Tier 3 can actually move to Tier 2 if they make adequate progress and are showing their ability to gain the necessary skills and qualify to move into Tier 2. So there's always room for growth in either model for students to move from the intensive need for intervention down to where, once they've had that specific intervention, it is done. So overall, the whole idea of intervention is a very useful idea, and hopefully these slides have explained to you how intervention has worked. I believe it is something worthwhile, and thank you for letting me take this time to show you.